If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. For one, it's free, and there are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will also distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So make sure you download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
Welcome to Growth with Portia, a weekly conversation for your personal and professional growth. Here is your host, Portia Booker.
Hey, listeners, welcome to Groove with Portia. I'm your host, Portia Booker, and yes, this is my real name. So, question for you. Did you bring your curious mind today? If so, I don't want to keep you waiting. Let's dive in. This conversation is number 3 in the series of honoring my beloved mother, Sharonne Lopez, who made her transition from Earth on July 7th, 2022. So today I am joined by a mental wellness professional and advocate who is on a mission to help others cope with life's challenges and manage their anger. She is the author of Let's Laugh, Live Anger Free, a journal that includes prompts, worksheets, and other tools to monitor feelings of anger, anxiety, and stress. She is also the co-host of the podcast and YouTube show, The Mental Health Minute with Dr. Candace, where discussions around mental wellness meet a home approach. So without further delay, welcome to Groove with Portia, psychotherapist, Dr. Tyra Gardner. How are you doing today, Dr. Tyra?
I'm doing well. How are you today, Portia?
Every day is great that ends in Y, even in our darkest moments. And so, Dr. Tyra, for starters, I'd love to begin my conversations with gratitude. What are you grateful for today?
Oh my goodness. I'm grateful for life because every day above ground is a good day. You know what I mean? And when you think about all of the negativity and things that's going on in the world, it's just like being alive is awesome. We have to make the best of every day, and we have to make every day count, and it's just like every day that I can help someone feel their best self makes me feel good. So,
Dr. Tyra, every day that I don't see my name in the obituary is a good day. So I think I'm on to that same plateau as you. And you're right. Every moment in our life, we have to make it count. Everything needs to be more intentional now more than ever because people are here today and gone within the same hour and the same day.
Yes.
So you just never know just how that missed opportunity could really be a missed thing for several years down the line. And Dr. Tyra, I always love to learn how people land in the mental wellness space. I mean, did you just wake up one day and pull like a magic wand out of a hat that says you're going to be a psychotherapist? So maybe share with our listeners, Dr. Tyra, how you became part of the mental health space.
You know what? I actually fell into this space because I actually set out to become an attorney. And it was so funny because somebody said to me, you wanted to be a counselor. You wanted to be a counselor, but you came out being a counselor. And I'm like, makes a lot of sense. I said, makes a lot of sense. So I actually started out working in geriatrics. And honestly, it was supposed to be a temporary position, right? And I was working at a hospital here in Philadelphia. And I was like, okay, I'll do this for a couple of years and then I'll head off to law school. Well, I got to the job and the money was looking good. So I said, okay, well, I'm not going nowhere. I'll just stay right here. They had to throw me out of this position. But I honestly loved what I was doing with working with the elderly because I started out as a geriatric therapist. And I loved working with the elderly and helping them navigate through adjusting to new life changes because I was working with seniors that were in a nursing home. And the way people treated them was horribly, because it was just like, and I had to, pull people aside constantly, with the nursing staff and stuff and say, hey, wait a minute. How would you like it if you lived in your home for 40 years and someone told you you gotta go and took you with one suitcase, not even your furniture or none of your, and just threw you in a one room with a stranger to live with that you have never in your entire life ever lived with a stranger, never ever, and all you now, you go from having 9 rooms in a home to having a shared room with 9 drawers. And so, yeah, so it was like with that. And that's when I was just like, I found myself becoming an advocate for the elderly at that time because it was just getting out of control. But then, fast forward, I took time off from working in mental health and started working in career counseling. But anything that you do in the realm of counseling, right, regardless whether you're counseling about careers, finance, spirituality, environmental issues, at the end of the day, it's all a part of wellness, right? And you find yourself working with people who have issues with mental health. So when you think you're leaving and avoiding it, you're not leaving and avoiding it. You're coming right back to it. So it all comes full circle. And that's what I found myself doing. And so as time went on, mental health is just something that, just fell upon me. And, and it's just being able to embrace it. You know what I mean? Because it's been a long time. I'm gonna keep it real 100 with you, Portia. I did not want to do this. I'm like, this field pays no money. I'm like, I need to be, in the glamour and the glitz of a profession that's doing big things. And I just said, you know what? With being in this area, being able to navigate in this lane and do what I have to do to basically educate people about mental health and make them aware because there's a lot of things that people don't know when it comes to mental health, such as how your physical connects to your mental. And so, with that being said, it's just being able to, discover my niche and being able to say, okay, now that I've discovered what I'm doing, now I need to be able to birth ideas and be able to stay relevant so that I can educate the masses. And so that's how I got into mental health.
And so really it's kind of you started as that advocate unintentionally where you're in geriatrics, then you move into the nursing home space and you're really listening to these residents and learning about their stories. And like you said, just all of a sudden, I'm angry because you made me pack up my whole living quarters into one suitcase, maybe a little chump change purse of however much money I can take. So literally my whole life has been uprooted. So of course I'm angry. Of course I'm frustrated. I've literally been caged like an animal. Literally.
Yes.
And Dr. Tyra, for you, what would you say was maybe a pivoting moment in that with you? When you were in this space listening to a lot of these different residents expound on their story and, what they went through, what was that moment where you're like, I think this is my calling instead of going towards being a chancellor or counselor in a different space?
I think for me, that moment was sitting back and for me, when looking at how some of the residents were being treated, right? And I was put in a position where I was a mental health advocate, for the hospital, right? And it was like, and at that moment, it was just like, somebody gotta be the person to speak up for these people, because the thing is, their families, some families were involved, some families had work and could not be there, you know what I mean? And and I know I would have wanted somebody to tell me if something was going wrong, and that's when I seen like, okay, yeah, this is something that I need to do. I need to be able to advocate for those who don't have a voice. And mental health has been silenced for so long that now it's like it's like now it's all over the place. However, you still have the stigma, right? Because a lot of people still are not receptive to getting help for mental health issues. So now it's like making making things a little worse, because now we gotta fight to get into those areas to make people, respect the profession.
100%. And then two, the amount of dialogue that's being had around mental health. And maybe you can elaborate too on this, Dr. Tyra, where we're seeing more things on social media. People are being more vocal, whether it's through TikTok videos or Facebook lives, etc. But how does that also deplete from people actually seeking proper mental wellness care?
So with that, with everything we see on social media, right? You know, people, some people are seeking out the care, right? But some, look at it as fad also, and first I wasn't going to touch on that, but at the end of the day, I need to. It's like, okay, I see this celebrity having these type of issues. Okay, so if she got a therapist or he has a therapist, I'm going to go get me one. And it's just like being able to tell people that's not how it works. You know what I mean? Because in therapy, you're going to unpack some things that happened in your life that you may not have experienced. That you experience, but you may have not been able to get the words out to communicate it with others. You know what I mean? And so with that, it's just like basically helping people to understand the reality of it. And I appreciate social media for bringing the awareness. But I want people out here to know that it's more than a TikTok video.
Dr. Tyra, you hit on what I wanted to get to was the fad portion, because I will be in agreement with you where I see that there's certain people who make this appear to be like it's a fad, as though it's something that is trending per se. And it's like, no, this is not something that needs to be trending news. This is people's lives. This is people's well-being. For some people, they've been unfortunately plagued by maybe severe depression, anxiety for the last 2 years because of COVID. There could be several issues that people are wrestling with. And then here comes social media to make a joke out of it.
Right. Right.
And so, Dr. Tyra, what tips can you leave for people when they're using social media and they want to maybe post something that either spreads awareness about mental health, but does not make it appear as though it is quote unquote a fad or trending?
So number one tip I will give is number one, do your research. Okay, do your research about what you're posting, because there's so many people out there that's posting information that they really don't know anything about. Be mindful of what you're posting and know that people will question you, and come back for you and ask questions about that. So number one, be responsible while doing your research. So that's number one answer, right? Number three, if you need help, don't be afraid to ask for help from someone, before you start posting on social media. Okay. Because there are a number of social media managers and strategists out there that can help you with things like that. Number four, if you want to be an advocate, do more than post. Okay. Because just because you put that post out there, that doesn't mean, that you're an advocate. You have to be out there. You have to do the work. It's more than just a than a meme.
And it's more than just the title too, because Dr. Tyra, we ain't gonna go on the memes, because I can talk all day about some of them memes that just, they make my eyeball twitch when I look at them, because I'm like, wow, somebody was really pulling a Goldilocks and the Three Bears show here, but that's for a whole nother day. We're gonna take a quick break right here on Group Portia. Everybody, stick with us. We will be right back. All right, everybody, welcome back right here on Group Portia. I'm joined remotely with Dr. Tyra, and we've just been having a great conversation, of course, about social media usage and mental wellness practices. So, Dr. Tyra, as I mentioned in the very opening of my show, my mom passed away on July 7, 2022. And, when we talk about grief, there's different stages of grief, whether it's shock, denial, acceptance, all of those. And we know that everybody goes through the stages differently. Not everybody's going to go through them all parallel. Some people might go backwards, some might go forward, some might pull the pancake analogy where they're wrestling between two. I don't know. And so,
Right.
Dr. Tyra, you're very skilled in the area of anger, and that
Mm-hmm.
is also one of the stages of grief. What would you
Mm-hmm.
say, Dr. Tyra, is a unique maybe way that anger presents itself during the grief process?
And so one of the things that I will say that happens, that is really common in the grief process when anger, is something that will come up through, you know, the loss of the love of your loved one, right? Because you are feeling lost, and not understanding exactly what happened, right? And so what people need to understand that anger is a natural part of grief, right? And so bottom line is one of the things is being able to cope with the situation that happened, and being able to move forward, and being able to voice your feelings, and being able to express your anger in a way that your emotions won't be suppressed, being able to show people that you have strength, through trying times. We all know that grief is something that over the past few years has been something that many have experienced. And it's like we know a lot of people get upset, right, when they see people getting angry. And one thing I've always heard people say, well, what they mad at? And it's just like, wait a minute, no, don't question somebody's emotions around it. Now, granted, when people are anger because of grief, do we see displaced emotions? Yes, we do. We see where people may take their grief out on others because they are angry, because they're upset about the person leaving them behind, and trying to make sense of how did this happen, but at the end of the day, it's just being able to basically, understand what happened and being able to express yourself in a healthy way. And, for others to understand that this is a difficult part of your life.
And so, Dr. Tyra, maybe what is an exercise that maybe people can do when they are feeling? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
anger is normal. Like
Mm-hmm.
they say, there's nothing wrong with the emotion of anger. It's the action
Mm-hmm.
is that can be the
Mm-hmm.
problematic part. The
Mm-hmm.
action can either land you, in one pit of fire, or it can
Mm-hmm.
land you on the
Mm-hmm.
opposite side of doing something good. And so,
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Tyra, what would you recommend that? I know for me, when I
Mm-hmm.
notice my thoughts start to become very upset with some of the processes that transpired during my mom's homegoing, I try to really catch those thoughts and either convert them into an
Mm-hmm.
activity, like I'll do some writing or some wood burning, but I
Mm-hmm.
try not to allow that thought of anger to
Mm-hmm.
fester for too long. So, Dr. Tyra, maybe what is an exercise that people can do if they find that their anger is really clouding everything that they're doing during the grief
So
process?
one exercise that I know, and I love, what you said you were doing, because that does help, right? When it comes to finding exercises, you definitely have to find what activity works for you. The number one activity I always go to is journaling, right? Because if you keep a journal, write down your thoughts and your feelings, and being able to express yourself about the things that's been going on in your life, So that's one activity a person can do. Being able to create a memory box, and creating a memory box is, putting things that the person, your loved one, had, putting all of the things that you may have had from them, keepsakes, pictures, things that happened, that created positive memories, getting those types of things and creating that memory for yourself, being able to write a letter. You could write a letter to your loved one. Just because they're not in the physical don't mean that, they're not watching you and seeing everything that's going on. So you can still share with them the feelings that you're having and letting them know about the things that's happening, in your life, being able to do that. I would say also, some people reading works, Reading something to take your mind off of things, especially when you're feeling stressed out, at that moment, being able to any type of artsy activity, such as painting. I know people go to paint night and things like that, you know, creating a picture, having yourself a pamper day also helps with the healing journey. Making sure while you're doing all this, making sure that you eat healthy and keep drinking your fluids. Fluids, not alcohol, water, juice. Because see, a lot of people, when we go through grief, the first thing we go to is a bottle, wine, beer, hard liquor. But what I'm here to say is that is not your answer, because guess what? The issues are still here. So you can drink and do everything you want to do, but the problem is not going to change. All that is going to do is create more of a problem, because now you're going to go along the lines of addiction.
Ooh, and Dr. Tyra, you literally just hit on my next question, because a lot of us, several people who I've spoken to within the last couple of weeks, are still going through the
Mm-hmm.
grief process,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a lot of unprocessed
Mm-hmm.
emotions within that. And so
Mm-hmm.
what I find is that a lot of them have been
Mm-hmm.
powering through addictive behaviors, whether it's becoming
Mm-hmm.
workaholics, or like what you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned, taking in substances or
Mm-hmm.
indulging in other behaviors. And so, Dr. Tyra, what would you recommend that people can do to find that balance where they're not just powering through the emotions and
Mm-hmm.
keeping those emotions unprocessed, and they're continuously being a prisoner of the grief instead of learning how to grieve properly and work through them?
One thing I would say is, for a person who might be experiencing this, and having trouble with it, finding a support group. Some funeral homes do have, at least in Philadelphia, a few of the funeral homes here have partnered with therapists to offer that service, to them, when times like this, happens, so being able to join a support group or find a therapist that, you can work with, that will help you through this process, and we know that it's a trying time. We know everybody's not receptive to therapy, you know, but if you're going, like if you attend church, being able to speak with your clergy, or your spiritual advisor, being able to talk to them about some of the issues, everything that's going on, because, everybody knows grieving is not easy. We all have to go through this. Do we want to go through this? No. This is not something that we pick and choose, say, hey, I want to do that today. Uh-uh. You know, but one thing when it comes to grief, right? Grief is not only just grief for death, right? People grieve in relationships as well. When you've been dating someone or married to someone for so long and the relationship ends, that's that's grieving a relationship, because that's an end of a relationship. Friendships, Lord have mercy, lately there has been a lot of friendships ending, which we've been experiencing a lot of situations with grief for that. It's okay. It's okay. We do grieve in friendships, because it's the end of an era, but being able to pick up the pieces as best we can, cherish the memories, and being able to move forward and doing what you have to do, so that you can get through the day. And you will have times where talk about some of the times that you get, and it's okay. That's what you're supposed to do, especially when you are around people, for long periods of time. You will talk about all of the fun things that you did, and that's fine to talk about it.
And definitely, Dr. Tyra, I love what you mentioned about, grief is not pretty. It's
Mm-mm.
not a wave of a magic wand. You're here sitting in the doom and gloom, and we wave this magic wand and you're cured. It's not that simplistic. It's a process. And I think there's this paradigm where we believe that everything is like the McDonald's line analogy, where we're just gonna wait in line for 5 minutes and then everything's gonna change over. No, grief is that time stamp of reality that's like, hey, I'm not going away just right off the bat. I didn't pick just random any person to just tell them to go through this process. No, this is a part of life. And so, Dr. Tyra, for our listeners who are tuning in, maybe what tip can you leave with them about just grief in itself, where we can not only look at it from the perspective of the loss of a loved one or friend, but more so as in the loss or an ending of whether it's a job or a friendship or relationship? What tips can you leave with our listeners today around the process of grief, Dr. Tyra?
Okay, so tips that I would leave, the seven tools. I'm gonna give y'all about 7 tools to be able to process grief, right? The first thing you need to understand is, guess what? You're not alone. You are not alone, because a lot of people feel that they are alone when it comes to grieving. You're not alone. Be gentle and kind to yourself. Okay, when going through when things is happening, right? Being able to know that you won't feel this way forever. Know that this is not a forever feeling, and know that your feelings are normal. The feelings that you have are normal, and so just being able to understand that, and granted, you will experience all of the emotions in regards to anger, depression, because at the end of the day, this is something that happens, but we have to be able to navigate through these challenges, right? And navigate through our challenges the best way we know how, and so accept there's going to be times where you're going to be lonely, be able to accept that, but know that, being lonely is different from being alone. Okay. And that's what people need to understand, be able to embrace all of your emotions. Okay. And know that it's okay, because sometimes you get people that will be mean and rude, remove yourself from the situation around them and do what you need to do, and be able to put yourself on a regular sleep schedule, eat nourishing meals, you need to make sure you get plenty of rest, be able to continue to set your goals, be able to create your to-do list if that's what you need to do, having your daily activities, and being able to take care of your own innermost needs, right? And just being kind to yourself, because when things happen, that cause us to grieve, the first thing we do is we put that blame on ourselves. Don't blame yourself. Things happen, and what we know is things happen all of the time. So we just have to know that, okay, this is a process just like the other situations that occur in our life. And I just need to be able to find a comfortable way to handle this.
Yes, Dr. Tyra, thanks for reminding us of the be kind to yourself, because you are so right. We tend to immediately harm ourselves when there is moments of adversity or unfavorable circumstances. So yes, definitely remember to be kind to yourself. We're going to take another quick break right here on Group Portia. Everybody stick with us. We will be right back. right, everybody, welcome back right here on Group Portia. I'm doing remotely with Dr. Tyra, and we were just having a continued conversation on managing your anger while in the grief process, and also remembering to be kind to yourself during unfavorable seasons in your life. And so, Dr. Tyra, for our listeners who are tuning in, if they want to connect with you and learn more about your services, is there a social media handle or website you can share with us today?
Yes, you can find me on social media on Instagram at Anger Dr. Tyra. You can also find me on Twitter at Anger Dr. Tyra, also, and Facebook, Tyra Gardner. My website is the Wellness Center of Mindfulness.com. And my email is hello at wellnesscenterofmindfulness.com.
Excellent, excellent. So you can definitely connect with Dr. Tyra at your leisure. Dr. Tyra, you hit on something that I just could not ignore in our last segment.
Mm-hmm.
I find many individuals want to begin therapy, but they are obviously intimidated, whether it's by the stigma from their community or just the global stigma around mental illness. And so, Dr. Tyra, what would you say is the first step people can take in getting themselves into therapy, whether it's, doing a search on Google for a therapist? Is there certain criteria that they should look for depending on what the area they want to work in? What's maybe the first step, Dr. Tyra, to kind of like shed the veil of illusion to help more people feel more comfortable seeking help for their mental well-being in therapy?
So the first step I would say is with searching for a therapist. Number one, once you identify that you have an issue that you want to address, right? The first thing I suggest to do is to, if you have insurance, contact your insurance company. And on the back of the card, everybody, there is a phone number back there. And you should be able to contact them, and they will be able to provide you with a list of providers, right, that offer therapy. Secondly, I will say you could also search on social media for therapists. There are a lot of therapy groups out there, depending on what you're looking for, that will help you with locating a therapist. I'm thinking for like therapy for Black girls is one. Black Men Heal is another one. You can find them. You can do a Google search also for therapists. Now, if you know that you have a particular situation in regards to like maybe anxiety or anger, a particular specialty that you're looking for, then you can do a Google search and put in the search, you are seeking an anger management therapist or an anxiety-based therapist, and you will be able to find therapists that way also. Another way is going to Psychology Today. Psychology Today is one of our, is one of the largest publications out there, who has a lot of therapists. They have them listed by our areas, and they also have it by specialty as well. Now, if you are looking for a particular culture, you can also put that in also. Like, I'm only looking for African American therapists, or I'm looking for only Caucasian therapists. You can put that search in and be able to find the type of therapist that you want. The bottom line is being able to find a therapist that is culturally competent, right? Because you have a lot of therapists out here that are not, so you want to make sure you find one that fits your needs. Now, with finding a therapist, sometimes people like, oh, that one didn't work, that one didn't work, this didn't work, that didn't work. And guess what? That's fine. Because finding a therapist is like finding a mate. This is a person that you're going to be sharing your life with, right? And you want to make sure it's the right fit, and not somebody that's constantly, you're feeling like you're being badgered, or you're feeling like all they do is give me worksheets all the time and don't talk about my problems and things like that. You want to be able to, connect with your therapist on all levels, right? And so, so don't get upset with yourself if it requires 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different therapists. It's okay.
Yes, and I love what you mentioned about that, Dr. Tyra, because I'll be honest, I was one of those people where I went through, I would say 4 that, either did not align with the cultural competency or the insensitivity or inappropriate comments, dialogue, etc. And even this bout, I was a little hesitant to be like, oh, do I really want to jump back in the arena? Yes, because I'm doing it for me and I know that I need it. I had to, one, acknowledge. That's another thing too. And Dr. Tyra, can you expound on that? Because I think a lot of us will indirectly ask that question, should I go to therapy, knowing internally that there's some maybe childhood things or things that were dormant that have resurfaced. So can you elaborate on that, Dr. Tyra? What questions should we ask ourselves and be brutally honest?
Okay, so the first question I would say you need to ask yourself is, number one, why do I want to go to therapy? Okay. Second question, what has happened in my life, right? I want you to do a whole, from the time you were a child to your current age, right? And see exactly what has happened in your life, right? That may cause you to think you need therapy, right? Number three, what behaviors do I have that I find questionable in my life that makes me feel that I need therapy? Sometimes people mix therapy up with life coaching. It's not the same, right? Because we unpack issues very different in both realms. Sometimes you just need that support, right, from a therapist. You just want to have a therapist on standby in the event that you have a moment that you might need to talk, because sometimes that little anxiety bug might creep in, right? And to the point where it's like, okay, what now? And I need somebody to talk to about that. And so being able to be open and honest with yourself about your needs, because that's something that a lot of people are not. They're not open and honest about everything they need. And we know that a lot of people, say, oh yes, I go to a therapist. And it's just like, okay, and sometimes they divulge why, sometimes they don't. Is it any of your business? No, it's not anybody's business. But again, when it comes to fads, a lot of people think it's okay to say it, because it's a fad. But my thing is, when it comes to mental health and mental health awareness, you have to acknowledge, you have to be open and honest with yourself.
Ooh, yes, 100%. It starts with you. It does. And you hit the nail on the head, Dr. Tyra, when you said it's your responsibility. As a logical adult, it is your responsibility to unlearn and relearn how to be the best version of yourself with support. And so, Dr. Tyra, for our listeners who are tuning in, how would you recommend they prepare for their first therapist meeting? Should they bring a list of questions? What would you recommend that they prepare for their very first initial visit with their therapist?
Okay, so for the first initial meeting, I would say definitely, if you have a list of questions, please bring the list of questions in, right? And the questions that you should ask, you could ask your therapist, like, number one, how long have you been in practice? It's an open and honest answer, right? Because you see stuff listed on a website, but you don't really know, have you ever had clients such as myself, right? And, and what is your specialty? Because sometimes therapists don't have everything listed on their websites, right? And you might want to know, what type of things what type of specialties do they have? Also, education wise, what education do you have? How long have you been in business? The website should have all that information, but if it don't and it seems basic, it's not basic. These are questions that is fair enough for you to ask, see how the conversation goes. Some therapists will answer, some therapists may get smart. I'm not going to sit here and tell you there are some that won't, because some do, but at the same time, be able to, Just whatever questions that you feel comfortable enough to ask, know that no question is a bad question. Okay. All questions is, when you're basically getting help for yourself, this is your health. This is your life. And with bringing people in, you need to do what you need to do. So if asking a question, definitely I encourage it. I encourage asking questions.
And Dr. Tyra, I love what you just brought up about asking as far as their experience in
Mhm.
that said area that they're
Mhm.
trying to work through, whether it's anxiety, grief,
Mhm. Mhm.
depression, maybe adverse childhood experiences. And that
Mhm.
goes back to what you mentioned about asking
Mhm.
yourself that question of, why do
Mhm.
I need to go to therapy? What should I be
Mhm.
going to therapy for? And so,
Mhm.
Dr. Tyra, is there maybe questions that you as a therapist would love
Mhm.
for patients to start asking right off the
Mhm.
bat when they come in for their first visit? Because I think a lot of people, they don't
Mhm.
always know. They're already intimidated. One, they're anxious because they don't know how things are going to flow,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
probably they're a little intimidated because they're not sure. Maybe they've had a bad
Mhm.
run in with several therapists. So, Dr.
Mhm.
Tyra, what is maybe a few questions that you would want people to ask their therapist to make them feel more empowered, or that they've got something out of the visit than just another bill of some sort?
Right. Because you know what? Believe it or not, the number one question I think that, clients should ask is, how do you think therapy will help me? Because a lot of people go into therapy with different ideas, right? Based off of what they've seen on TV. Because the number one thing that a lot of us therapists get is, oh, I want to lay on your sofa. Lay on my sofa for what? Because they have seen for years which TV shows, and I'm gonna date myself, like Bob Newhart from back in the 70s and 80s, where he had the show where he was, the psychiatrist, and people think that that's what they're supposed to do, you know. But being able to say, being able to ask, how do you think therapy should help me? You know, asking the therapist, what approach do you take? What evidence based approach do you take to provide therapy? Me, for myself, I do cognitive behavioral therapy and solution focused therapy and reality, because a lot of people need a lot of reality checks when it comes to a lot of the things that is experienced in life. Do they like reality checks? Absolutely not. Nobody wants that. But when you work with a solution based therapist, right? Solution focused therapist, you will get that, and some people just, are not receptive to it. But hey, you know, it happens, in regards to preparing, being able to ask the therapist up front, how frequently do you think we should meet? Now, when you meet with the therapist the first time, right? Look at your time constraints, right? And look at your schedule and see how it is. Now, if you're in a severe case, I'm going to tell you, that would be between you and your therapist. Some might say weekly, some might say bi-weekly, some might say once a month. Depends on the need. But know that you have a say in how often you meet. Okay? Because at the end of the day, this is your health, right? And being able to be okay with that. Medication. That's a question that needs to be talked about as well, because a lot of therapists do not prescribe medications, right? So being able to ask, how would I get medication should I need it, as we're talking? Do you have a provider that will be able to prescribe this to me? Being able to ask that question early on, so that, guess what, you don't have any surprises moving down the road when if something happens and they need medication, and then all of a sudden, oh, I don't have nobody I can send you to. That's doing the client a disservice. So if you have this information in the beginning, already in in advance. Um, Another question people ask is, how will I know if therapy is actually working? Well, the answer to that question, you have to do the work. Therapists, psychiatrists, psychotherapists, psychologists, we provide you with the tools. It's up to you to do the work.
And that's the reality check that Dr. Tyra just served. And we are going to take another quick break right here on Group Portia. Everybody stick with us. We will be right back. All right, everybody, welcome back right here on Group Portia. Well, Dr. Tyra, thank you so much for coming on and sharing with our listeners so much food for thought and reality checks, words of wisdom. Dr. Tyra, again, if one of our listeners is interested in connecting with you and learning more about you, is there a website or social media handle you can share with us today?
Yes, they can reach me on all social media at Anger Dr. Tyra. You can reach me at my website, the Wellness Center of Mindfulness.com.
Excellent, excellent. Dr. Tyra, I want to go back to, grief, as we know, looks different for each person, as I've mentioned. And what I've wrestled with, and I know a lot of people have in the initial grief process, is asking for support. I often get if you need anything, let me know. I'm here. And I appreciate that. But at times, that's overwhelming for, someone who's grieving, especially if it's very recent. And so, Dr. Tyra, from your perspective, what tips can you leave for family members, close friends, and loved ones who want to support someone in their time of grief?
So one thing I will say is I know when you're in a time of need, right, a lot of people want to be there for you, but don't know how. And so with that, being able to meet the person where they're at emotionally, right? Being able to, comfort them, but don't coddle them. Don't baby them. Because what happens is when people are going through things, the first thing they do is baby them. And, and the one thing that, I know with losing my father 25 years ago, one of the things that always replays in my mind is how when he passed away, everybody was there. Right. And then after the funeral, after the burial, that's when it got quiet. Nobody was around and you're left alone. And it's just like, well, where everybody at now? Y'all took a dive and just rolled out, but being able to, don't lose touch with them because you don't know what to say. You can call them, you can check up on them, being able to, call them, check up on them, have conversations with them, don't be afraid to reach out to communicate, know that they're still around and they still want to talk, and so, and granted, we know times people become emotional, when they, talk to you and everything, and that's okay. And know that the person who's grieving, you're all grieving together, and just being able to say, it's okay. And we can talk, we can love one another, and just being okay with that, without being upset or mean to one another, because we do see a lot of anger.
Oh, 100%. When grief, comes in, it affects each person differently. Even the person who is directly affected, like in my case with my mom. I know that, each person who has been a part of my mom's life, whether they're her siblings, her nieces, nephews, they all have a different eye view of this experience that we've all been granted. And so, I agree with you, Dr. Tyra, to just, continue to show up. And, it doesn't have to be every day. It can be, at least once a week, or even schedule. Put a reminder in your phone, because I know I have to do that for myself, for, some of my mom's, close friends who are around her age and older. I don't want them to forget, or think that, my schedule's too busy where I can't reach out to them. So really just being, again, intentional and, carving out that time, because time is so precious. And
but that's a two-way street too. They can reach out to you just like you reaching out to them.
Yeah, 100%. And that's the one thing I will say I am blessed about is people do call often. I may not be able to answer all the time because I'm either busy sleeping, like what you mentioned, getting proper
Getting that
rest.
rest.
Because sometimes I become a night owl where literally I'm up. And that's another thing with the grief process is like your sleep pattern is just so rocky. It's literally
Right.
like, geez, did I like switch with a koala bear or something? Like, what is going on here? And so that's why I take naps throughout the day now, just to
Yes.
give myself an extra boost of rest and focus, or meditation. I do my daily grounding meditation to help with my focus because I have that's I'm gonna be honest, I have squirrel span. Sometimes
Okay.
I literally have the attention span of a squirrel and a gnat put together. So it's
Right.
next to
Okay.
nothing.
Okay. Okay.
But I'm able to still use that to my advantage where I'm mindful enough to say, okay, need to sit down and meditate for a minute.
Right.
Definitely do.
Right.
Dr. Tyra, I gotta ask this. You wear so many hats. I mean,
Yes.
obviously, you have your own clients, you're your own therapist, you're a podcast host, you're also an author. You do different media contributions. And so, Dr. Tyra, for you as a therapist, how do you prioritize your self care and find that balance between I love what I do so much, but I also love my clients enough where I have to take a break?
So what I do is I'm a therapist with a therapist, right? I belong to a lot of therapy groups with a lot of colleagues here in Philadelphia. I belong with therapy groups that with other therapy groups that's out of the state of Pennsylvania, and where I find help with various things where we talk about our feelings and emotions about a number of things that is going on in our own lives, so that we can all be able to heal. You know, um, and I also made it a practice to start basically taking trips. Now that we starting to open up a little bit, I've been, being able to do some things. I've been discreet with my travel, and I'm gonna be completely honest, Portia. I've been working it to the point where I've been trying to take a trip a month or whatever, and I only started in May, and I just like the month of July, I laid low a little bit, which I didn't want to, but I laid low a little bit, but I find that has been giving me the peace that I need, because the thing, peace is everything. And people really don't know what peace of mind is, until you experience it. And once you experience, there's no going back. I promise you that. I ain't going back. Nope, not at all.
So wait, Dr. Tyra, who served you a reality check on that?
But you know what? No, you know what? I've always, felt something about peace. And it's like when I look at various situations, and I have a number of people in my life, and I have some people that's nothing but chaos, right? Don't know how to turn it down, right? But then I have other people in my life who's about whatever issues is happening, the issues is there, but they deal with it head on and then throw it out the window, right? And then nothing comes back. And you are where you're at. You deal with the situation head on, and then that's it. We move on. And just being in a situation like that, we're having people that is as peaceful as pie. It makes you feel good. You know what I mean? And it was just like this one particular day. I just remember it was like one day I was with my relatives that was like right. But then they was just like all over the place. But then the next day I was with my, relatives who were peaceful, right? And I just remember we came home from an event with them, right? From, the day of chaos, you came home. Of course, when you come home with chaos, you come home with people you just talking like about the nonsense because you're laughing about the nonsense that happened, right? But when I came home from my relatives with the signs of peace, it was like we just sat there and we just looked at each other and we was just like, gosh, you ever felt so good? And it was just like it was a whole sense of calmness in your soul You know what I mean? And it was just like an experience in that I was just like, yo, I can't go back to that. I want that. And that's what, and that's when you just start making it. I want that in my life. I don't want this. And being able to make that decision, like, get that out of here. So yeah, so peace is everything and peace over everything.
In that order. In that order. Ooh, Dr. Tyra, I knew this conversation was going to be worth the wait. We're going to be wrapping up here soon, Dr. Tyra, and you have left us with a lot of food for thought, words of wisdom, and a different way for people to look at grief and taking their mental wellness into their own hands. What words of inspiration, Dr. Tyra, can you leave with our listeners today? Whether it's someone who was once stricken by anger, then wants to convert it into something good, or someone who has been in that shoe of, I've gone to multiple therapists and they want to give it another try. What words of inspiration can you leave with our listeners today, Dr. Tyra?
One thing I will say is don't give up. Know that, whatever help that you want, it's all about you. You want to change your life, and change is good, right? Sometimes, things happen in our lives and we don't know how to respond, right? But know that number one, we can take a step back. I want you to think first before reacting to anything in your life, because if you don't think first, that next reaction is going to be something that you do not want. So I want you to be able to be calm, and I want you to be able to process, think, process what's going on, and being able to embrace change.
In that order, definitely take a moment to think before you take any action, and also give yourself permission to process what has transpired instead of trying to power through each and every moment of your life. Well, everybody, that was Dr. Tyra Gardner you heard from. And that concludes another episode of Groove Portia, everybody. Thanks for listening and have a good evening.